kitchen and let him know that if he's not ready to clean his house up, if he's not ready to clean his house up, he shouldn't have a house.
The pay differential never seems to close, and the World Economic Forum found that if we continue at our current pace, it will take 100 years to close the global gender gap. So we literally cannot do that long.
They're not afraid of four musicians. They're afraid of you.
Oh, welcome to Cellar Door Skeptics tonight. Thank you all so much for joining us. It's been a crazy week. Last week, my kid graduated from high school, so there was that. I had to go to that graduation. I had a lot of other things I had to do, so it was a very, very busy week. You all probably noticed we changed the show a little bit. I added a new intro with a new intro music, so tell us how you like it. Either tweet at us, send us an email, yell at us in Discord, yell at us on Facebook, whatever floats your boat. But we created a new intro to kind of replace the older intro to allow for two things. One, to get rid of the racist bastard that did the intro before, so I don't have to hear his voice anymore. And to add our new co-host that we added last year about this time, Buddy the Lumberjack. So I kind of wanted to update our show to ensure that we were able to include him as well. So tonight we have an amazing show planned. We got a guest that's going to come on called Frakkle, not Fraggle, but Frakkle. And he is part of the Rogue Media coup. And essentially what he is here to talk about is his new show, or I guess it's a 2-year-old show, so excuse me. But he's here to talk about his love for video games, as well as how he mixes that with his political conversation. So we're going to have him on in a few minutes, and he's going to join us for the whole show and tell us all about his show called Frakkle. We're also going to be talking about Fauci's smoking gun, his ouchie emails, because we know those are a hot topic right now, and the conspiracy theorists are running wild. And we also have a segment from Hannah about dark matter, and if it's not just for Futurama. With that being said, let's bring in our other host, Buddy the Lumberjack, and Hansel the Engineer. How are you doing tonight, fellas?
Better than last week, although I didn't have a screaming cat keeping me up all weekend because she's in heat and doesn't know how to handle it because it's a kid going through puberty and the hormones and uncontrollable. And then we got her fixed later on last week. So now no more wailing cat in the middle of the night, keeping everybody awake.
That's probably a good thing.
Yeah, the sound wasn't always an issue for me being a deaf person. It was the vibrations I could feel through the walls when the cat would do the Matrix run along the walls.
The parkour. Late night parkour, yeah. That's that. Well, we're crate training the little one. She's just over 5 months old now. So she is sleeping in the crate at night. But it's just.
Well, don't they sleep like 90% of the day, anyways? So
I don't know who made that lie up, but I want their credentials. Sleep. I want their credentials gone because I have 2 cats that I thought were supposed to sleep like 16 to 20 hours a day. But I've got 2 cats that are awake for 16 to 20 hours a day, and I don't know why.
Well, that sounds terrible.
It's
I
almost.
I went camping again, so that's all I did.
I know. We saw all the pictures, and actually, your story is going to be our answering conservative questions of the week. But don't give it away. Don't give it away yet. But that's going to be our answering conservative questions this week because you had a very good engagement with some fellow people, we'll call them, on the interwebs.
I posted one and then I just kind of backed away from it because I don't get pulled into those threads anymore. Like I'll give one serious comment and then I just kind of let it just float. I used to spend hours. I would spend 60 minutes on a response, like intricate, get my grammar correct. I wanted all the big words. I really just wanted to bludgeon you with my intellect. And in the end, nowadays, it's just so. I don't know. But other than that, like camping was nice. I've done it 2 weekends in a row, and the last weekend was warm and it was enjoyable. We had some cool neighbors. The girls are still crazy at nighttime, and tent sleeping is wild. But we're getting better at it. We got all of our gear, so we kind of keep it all bundled together. So instead of having to assemble it all, kind of keep it together. So it's something that my wife enjoys doing, and I didn't see it coming, but it seems to be a thing that our family will do. And we'll see if that can be a way to keep the girls in the outdoors and just experiencing that, because we're pretty much tablet free for the girls for the whole time that they're gone. Sarah and I will get on in the evening, but other than that, it's a nice disconnect. It's pretty cool, even if it's only like 2 hours to go somewhere. We don't go really far.
Yeah, those are some pretty awesome pictures, though. I'll be honest.
Well, right on Lake Erie. I mean, Cleveland they called the mistake on the lake. So it's you just ride up Lake Erie up into Pennsylvania and New York. It's pretty cool.
Well, without further ado, I think we're going to bring our guest into the loop here, and let's add him to the stream. Oh, there he is.
Howdy. Good evening.
Welcome,
Thanks so much
sir.
for having me.
Yeah. So Frakkle is from the Rogue Media Co-op, and I say it wrong. Just it's an inside joke in the show. I say it wrong every time because Hannah laughed harder than he probably should have the first time I said it, and so it's just kind of one of those things where I say it's a coup, and it, to some extent it kind of is a little bit. It's a coup. We're trying to take over. We're trying to take over. Somehow,
I would say that if we were hearing about Islamic terrorist coups, I would be a little bit less worried. But it gives it a color of speech. It's goofy.
Is that how that's working?
Yeah, it's definitely a good project to be a part of, and a lot of very good minds are associated with the Rogue Media label. So,
yeah, and so what we wanted to do is we wanted to have people from the network on the show. Because for a long time we didn't do a lot of guests.
I heard that.
It's Hannah. We didn't do a lot of guests for a while, just because our time frame is 10 p.m. Like, we have a very, very tight time frame, as you saw from the beginning of the show, because Hannah has two little kids that are very, very demanding.
Mm-hmm.
And Buddy lives in a different time zone, and I'm the flexible one, I guess, of the group. So,
You started way earlier than everyone else. But yes,
I did.
Sorry for the glitch there. My hearing aid died and disconnected from the Bluetooth, and then automatically started piping the audio through the main speaker of the machine because these things are so smart. So
it thinks you can hear it. You're like my hearing aid, and I can't hear it anyway.
yeah.
Anyway, so Frakkle, welcome to Cellar Door Skeptics. So the way you introduced your show to me was it's a combination between gaming, online gaming, and politics, and you do a lot of kind of a mix. And I watched some of your shows this week, honestly, and I was like, now I thought I streamed a lot. You stream more than we do. You were streaming for 6 hours at a time.
Jesus.
I was like,
yeah.
How did you not go pee? You waited 2.5 to 3 hours before you took a break. That's crazy to me. I had to pee halfway through that, and you don't have a co-host to cover for you. At least I have two.
Yeah. So so I do only stream one night a week, but I try to make it count. So I do about a 7-hour segment, or try to. It goes anywhere between 6 and 8 hours, depending. And this initially started purely as a gaming hobby. And so what happened was I was going along and, doing my thing. And then the George Floyd murder happened. And that happened on a Wednesday. And Wednesday is the day that I was supposed to go on for stream. And it was just consuming all of my thoughts. I was like, I'm not in a mindset to do game content. I'm not in a mindset where I can be an entertainer today. So I was like, okay, what do I do? And I just decided, you know what? I'm just going to punch go, and I'm just going to talk and get things off my chest. And so instead of gaming, I just did, a lot of coverage of not only that, but a lot of just the litany of, police killings that have happened and the injustice of it all. And I guess with my audience, it was pretty well received, to be able to just have that kind of frank discussion. Because I'm sure it was on everyone's mind, but, there's kind of this taboo about talking politics in any sort of space, because you're like, you don't want to rock the boat. And I've kind of, through the course of, getting that going, and from then on, I basically did a split segment where I would do gaming up front and then politics and current events on the back half. I really think that society has done itself a disservice in establishing politics as a taboo subject. I think it's made people kind of politically illiterate, because we're not able to have those frank discussions and, be forced to defend and further develop our positions and thoughts on things. And that's not to say that all political discussion is good to have. Like, there's no point in having a conversation with a fascist. But, with just normal, routine people, a vast majority of the electorate is generally apolitical and uninformed, and they will stay that way unless those conversations can happen. So that's kind of what I try to do, is lure people in with kind of relaxed gaming content, and then sucker punch them with the political discourse.
Well, and that's kind of the one thing I saw was you did all your gaming, and I'll be honest with you, I've never heard of, at least the ones I've watched, I've never heard of those games.
Sure.
At all. Like, I've never heard of them, and some of it's because I'm a Mac guy and I don't PC game at all. Yeah. And some of that's driven because as a child I grew up with a PC very young, right? My father was in IT. We always had a computer. I always gamed because you were constricted by console. But when PlayStation released, it was like, holy crap, I'm getting better stuff than I have for my computer in a gaming console. Why not? Anyway, so a lot of my game life has always been PlayStation, but I've never also been a streamer for games. I've never enjoyed that because I'm probably not very good in the long run. So if we're going to be honest, I'm okay, but I'm better at board games. I'm better at those other things. So what got you into specifically streaming online games? Like, what was your niche? Like, what game did you say, this world needs to hear Frakkle, and they need to hear about this game?
So there's two answers to that. The first one is going all the way back to a now defunct MMO called WildStar, and it was a fantastic MMO that was woefully underappreciated, and there were very few people that were doing like end game content in it, and I was one of them. And I was like, okay, I want to stream this just to at least bring more awareness and hopefully bring more players to this game, because everyone's playing World of Warcraft, which is it's just junk food for the MMO player. Unfortunately, that one closed down. And for a stretch, I was not streaming anymore. But then later, one of my very good friends, Miko Inkwell, who still streams on Twitch today. He streamed RimWorld, which is one of my main games that I stream on the show, and he kind of approached the game from a very unique angle, and just over the course of developing a friendship with him, he encouraged me to do a stream and show my angle of the game, which was very different from most of the players in the directory. I play a very mechanical, focused type of play. Most of the people who stream RimWorld and a fair number of strategy type games, they play them and they may intuitively know a lot of the mechanics, but I spend a lot of time just like doing number crunching and doing test scenarios and actually stretching the limits of what's possible. And a lot of what I was did, especially in the earlier days of streaming RimWorld, was tutorial and science segments where the science was like doing the science of the game. Like, okay, let's set this up and let's try this out with these variables in play. Okay, that went that way. What if we change this? What actually changes in the behavior of the pawns and things that happen? Let's set the scenario up again, change those, and run it again. And RimWorld. Actually made a number of discoveries for the game community itself through the course of that, which I'm pretty proud of. And that's kind of my approach to games, is very interested in getting into the guts of it and figuring out how things work.
Break down the system itself. Yes. Like what's going on. That was like a top down. That's not an isometric. That's just a standard top down RPG.
It's a base builder. I would describe it as like The Sims, but if it was a survival RTS.
Okay.
Because a lot of it is also focused on the lives of the individual pawns and their relationships with each other and their mental states and stuff. You have to keep them happy.
It's not so much questing as it is kind of world building.
Right. There are quests, but yeah, and there is like a end game objective of trying to get off the planet. But yeah, it's a very interesting long form game.
Cool.
So is this like, okay, and I'm going to say this word and you're going to probably think it's weird, but is this like Factoria?
There are similarities to Factorio in trying to set up like your supply chains and your labor and such. However, it's a little more involved from the aspect of taking care of the actual characters, because they are not they're not robots. They have needs, they have desires, they have moods. They can get pissed off at each other and just start a brawl with each other because one of them insulted the other one. And that can happen in the middle of trying to defend your base from outside attackers too, which can be really disruptive.
Fair enough.
Whereas with Factorio, as long as the machines are set up, they will operate exactly how they want to operate. So there's a bit more direct control of things.
So another question, you don't, in this world, in RimWorld, that's a weird name, but in RimWorld, like I just think of the Outer Rim and I think of Star Wars, and the next thing now I'm getting down that path. But
you're not wrong.
Okay.
The name RimWorld is actually worlds that are on the rim of the known galaxy. So it's ones that are way out there at the very fringes. They're trying to get some colonies off the ground or explore them. We don't actually get to.
Sounds like.
Yeah, we don't get to actually see like the core of the galaxy or anything like that in this current game. But it alludes through lore and such that it exists.
So
But yeah.
in a lot of that reminds me, like, so I played Final Fantasy VII. That was the first larger open world thing that I played
Wow.
that was story driven, but at the same time had some of that you could build your own thing. And then I kind of got into RPGs from there, honestly. Now, I'll be honest, I personally find the tabletop RPGs or like a Dungeon and Dragons style more engaging. And it's only probably because I could sit around. Well, when I was a kid, it was sit around and eat pizza and drink cola. That's what it was. Now it's sit around and, drink whiskey and eat pizza and play D&D. But
you are speaking my language. I also have a soft spot for tabletop RPGs.
well, there you go. So if you're ever in Michigan and you want to do one, you just got to say, hey, Tanner, I'm in Michigan. You want to play that? You want to play? I got a board game store right by my house. Plus, I got, I don't know, I have more board games than Hannah has camping and equipment. We'll put it that way.
One of the things I love about tabletop RPG is being able to smuggle social critique and political concepts into games. So my game of choice is Shadowrun, which is a dystopian hyper-capitalist takeover that the protagonists are kind of plucky rebels living off the grid and trying to subvert mega corporate and government plots that are like abusing wage slaves and such. So basically, a potential future of America.
It's what we are.
Yeah.
Speaking of dystopian futures, I'm working my way through. I try to limit the amount of content that I consume when it comes to Philip K. Dick because it's limited, much like Hemingway and a lot of other people. And I'm going through right now Flow Your Tears, The Policeman Said, which is a great paranoid freak out story of a dystopian future and things along those lines. And like, one of the things that some of these tabletop things, some of these online games do is what they do is they add a world. They have a world building situation that happens, but also they sneak in a lot of really important things when it comes to conscientiousness, consciousness, what it means to be a person and a citizen in a system, and intellectual, all of these things, and then also it'll turn them on their heads and flip them around and make like the students and the educators the enemies to the state. And there's all kinds of really cool things that you see smuggled into these stories. I mentioned a few moments ago the Foundation series, the idea that rim worlds and outside worlds, and then there was a foundation creating empire essentially at the very core that started off basically on this completely and totally steel world that had been modified and manipulated, and that was the course of everything. It's like building those worlds and those things. A lot of this stuff is really cool. And I choose to find most of mine because my old screen name for online gaming when I first tried it out was does not play well with others. And so I tried it. I couldn't. I was told that my mom was particularly promiscuous, and there were a lot of other gratuitous words in there. And it's just like, this isn't fun. I play video games to get away from the world, and it's just a bunch of world coming in here. So like, I usually spend my time in the science fiction books and things along those audiobooks and stuff. But like, I don't know, buddy. Do you find in any of these worlds in Canada are there spaceship fighting moose up there and cobra chickens that just they're working their way through the upper galactosphere?
Well, I mean, we are engaged in a couple of covert wars that nobody will ever know about, that even just talking about means that the Canadian Intelligence Agency is going to start knocking at my door anytime now.
We've already called spam, or we've already called SWAT. They'll be knocking through your door in a second.
This isn't Xbox Live. Like, come on. That's kind of funny as you were saying that. I'm like, I only go onto Xbox Live when I want to find out how many 12-year-olds have slept with my mother. Like, really, there's no other reason to get involved with them.
Certain game communities, though, are really good. I'm guessing that Frakkle would say that as well.
Possibly, although that does actually kind of bring to mind a point. It's something that I kind of wanted to bring up with Frakkle here, mixing gaming and social justice, so to speak. How do you do that? Because I'm not gonna lie, I actually stopped doing a lot of online gaming. I used to play a couple of different MMOs, nothing crazy serious, but the people that I was playing around, like, they were so hypocritical in the way they held themselves, and it was like they went out of their way to be the biggest assholes imaginable, and maybe that's just the small subsect I dealt with. So I'm just kind of curious, like, how does that does that bother you at all, or?
No. So you're correct that most gaming spaces appear to be not only very bigoted, but also very conservative and such as that. That is, in my opinion, and a lot of this is just anecdotal. I don't have data to back it up. I haven't surveyed all gamers or anything, but anecdotally, I've observed that this is a byproduct of people being conditioned to not discuss politics. And the people who are exempt from that are these bigots and conservatives who are very open with their own ideation. And most of the gaming community tries to keep their head down and stay quiet. They're the ones who actually are very they're not necessarily like leftists, but they are, again, that generally apolitical group who can be swayed. And I'm interested in taking those people and swaying them in the same way that those very loud bigots have been doing that for years in the gaming communities, gaming space. So, and like I said, it's been very well received. I do lose some potential market that way, and I'm okay with that. Like, I would rather have a smaller but more decent community than a larger one that's just shouting racial slurs all the time.
That's totally fair. I appreciate that. I guess I kind of generalized it and wrote it off and was like, that's why I don't deal with a lot of people anymore. But
I think that's I think that is a very common attitude, and I think that has kind of resulted in being a self-fulfilling prophecy for many game communities, just to accept that this is just the way things are.
Well, Dunning-Kruger does appeal to the lizard brain quite effectively, and so we run into people that are essentially that ignorance that you're mentioning, but they have enough of an extroverted personality or position that they're willing to just say no and yell you down, and eventually most people are just going to keep fighting that, and so thereby by default the noisier, angrier, louder, wilder one wins, which isn't particularly the case in argumentation because they don't teach discourse or debate in school anymore.
Exactly. And the great thing about like running a small gaming community unto myself, it is I get to be the gatekeeper.
Ooh, I remember those when we used to do open atheist communications, and we would just be like, "Hey, someone said they're a Christian and they want to come in here." They'd be like, "Wow!" And I mean, Tanner used to throw the band hammer around like nobody's business back in the day. Like, he was just like. But some of those podcasts when we would run those would be 3-4 hours long. I remember when I would go to bed and be like, I gotta go, guys, and Tanner would stay up hours, and then eventually some of them got so bad that they got just straight up deleted. And those were the ones that are written into lore, into stone at the top of the mountain.
We do. That was back in the day, right?
Yeah, it was, man. We've been doing this for 7 years.
Well, we ran that not for 7 years. We only ran that for a couple years, but we've known each other for 7 years.
Stuff.
Yes.
Yeah.
And what Hannah, we used to have what we used to do is a 2-part show. We do one with atheist content, and then one with specifically having a conversation with Christians, and that's literally what we called it. And yeah, you're right. Between Johnny and I, and Johnny still messages me randomly every 3 or 4 months, says, "Hey, hop in this Discord and let's have a long conversation and debate Christians. You've done this. You're very good at this. And it's like, I get that, but that's not my interest anymore. I actually don't care if you're a Christian. I only care about how you vote. That's it. like, are you going to vote in a positive way for humanity? All right, good. We're golden then. You know, like I don't go ahead, believe in some, personal Jesus, whatever, float your boat. I don't care. But we did used to, I have a debate where we did like this informal roundtable debate, and it is literally 7 hours long. Literally.
Wow.
Now, my bathroom back then, because I was broadcasting in my living room, was probably about 10 to 15 feet from where I was sitting. So
That is
it
a
was
long
literally
stream.
just a bolt. Bolt.
Oh, wait, nobody's afraid of spiders here. I gotta get a big guy right here. I just sit here and they just all the walls. I'm in the woods, man. There's spiders everywhere.
But anyway, so
yeah.
you were talking about Frakkle. You were talking about your mixed audience, and I kind of actually like some of me admires that because I just started a new podcast as well. For board gaming, and one of my co-hosts literally told me you cannot talk politics on the stream. He told me that, and it's because we do have different politics. Now, in fairness, I'm pretty far out there. I'm pretty far left compared to a lot of people. So even on this, in here, I'm pretty much like an anarchist socialist. That's how if we burn society down. Whatever. I'm okay with it. Do it. Let's move on. But one of the big issues is like one of my co-hosts is a moderate, or a neocon is really more where he fits into. And he worries because we had to have a conversation about BLM once, and eventually it was just like, well, we're gonna have to agree to disagree. And it's like, we're not going to. You don't get it. You're white. I'm white. We don't even have a minority in this conversation, so our opinions only matter so much. But it was just, those were the notes where it's like, they are worried about losing audience because of my political opinion, because I'm aggressively staunch left. I'm very, even, we had, who's that gentleman? We just had Wabbit on 2 weeks ago, right?
Professor Rabbit or whatever it was?
Yes. And him and I disagree on gun control.
I saw that.
Yep. I'm, which is fine, right? It's a good conversation. We've had a good conversation about it. But that's where I go. And a lot of people get worried about my political leanings when it comes to board games, because when I joined my current board game group, I found out I was the farthest left, and my kid told me I need to shut the fuck up sometimes. That's literally what he told me. He's like, just don't talk politics, Dad, when we go play board games, please. I don't want to lose all the people that hang out with us.
Well, I mean, it makes when you play Risk really quickly because you're the pacifist who loses immediately.
God.
No.
I surrender, man. I surrender.
We don't play Risk anymore.
Civilizations where you play Gandhi and all he does is fight with the loom.
Oh God, I can't talk about that game. I can't.
So, Frakkle, how do you do it? How do you do that?
Well, so my advice in that capacity, and what I've kind of learned and adapted towards, is first identify kind of what your core message and goal is, and second, identify what your particular style of rhetoric, who that appeals to, like who's your target audience, and structure discussions around those two ideas. So my core idea is to find these liberals and the apolitical and moderates, educate them, have discussions about politics, get them talking, and through the course of talking, pull them slowly to the left. And this isn't just I don't do the outrage machine. I don't do the, low hanging fruit laughing at, conservative takes and stuff. Those are generally unhelpful for informing. And what I try to do is I tend to issue labels and that kind of thing. Like, it's not like, oh, I can't be labeled. I find that introducing labels or terms can shut down a conversation before it begins. For example, healthcare. I recently had someone on my show who has worked as a property adjuster for many, many years for storm damage, to assess storm damage and such as that. And they're intimately familiar with the way insurance as a system works. So I had them on, and we talked about how insurance works from a financial perspective, and why a single payer type system is just objectively, mathematically more functional. And as well as he had some very interesting ideas for how to transition into that without losing any jobs at all. Because of course that's the big concern is, how do we do this without losing all the people who work in these insurance industries? And like the pitch was, do it like we do flood insurance, which I didn't know how we did flood insurance, but having a resident expert on to talk about that introduces these sorts of things. So it's like, yeah, the federal government actually is a single payer system for flood insurance, but they then, push the work out to the actual, private companies to actually do the repairs and the actual damage assessment itself. But they are the single payer system that actually finances it and that we all pay into. So transitioning to a model like that, where it still propped up these private companies, but where they were not handling these smaller pockets of money, is a way to do that. So I try to have these conversations talking about the systems themselves. My main one that I like to talk about is police abolition. Obviously, not all of my audience is on board with that, but many of them have been swayed through this series that I'm doing, covering a series of essays by Kaepernick Publishing called Abolition for the People, where he organized 30 people, activists, lawyers, people with lived experience, etc., to write about different aspects of the carceral system, and how it is failing to do the one function that it is supposed to do, and how it preys upon minorities and marginalized groups. And so we cover one of these essays per week. We have a discussion about it. I introduce my thoughts. I talk to the audience about their thoughts. And, not everyone's on board with police abolition yet, but quite a few people who otherwise, initially were like, whoa, what are you talking about? Have gotten on board with the concept, because it is an institution that can only deliver state violence and doesn't actually resolve problems and help communities out. It is not an institution that can rehabilitate people. There is no avenue to be. What I like to say is there are a lot of law enforcement officers who I genuinely believe want to do good, but the system itself has no avenue to do that. It is purely a system to inflict state violence on people. So, this series of essays pitches things like having actual restorative justice, having community-driven, policing, where it's people who know the people around them, who are accountable to them, It's things like not just putting someone in a cage as the one and only solution to things, because it's just the wrong solution to most of the dispatches that happen. If someone is, out drunk, they need a ride home and maybe resources on addressing their drinking problem. If someone's high out of their mind, they don't need to be thrown in a cage. They need either just to be left alone to have a good time, or alternatively, again, some sort of resources for how to control their substance problem.
Are you familiar at all with Malcolm Gladwell's book, Talking to Strangers?
I am not. No.
You might want to check it out. It does a really cool thing talking about the Sandra Bland situation and what the Kansas City Policing Project did. Essentially, when they statistically analyzed the way the police system itself was working in certain areas, and by using hotspots and things along those lines, they found that they actually, if they use a system in an intellectual manner, and there's a very specific group of philosophical people in there that the way they're talking about using the system, changing it and everything, effectively it helped, and it was more of a helping the situation versus the stick versus the carrot. It's a really cool book, and it might be something that would fit into this, because Malcolm Gladwell does a really good job of taking things from a 10,000 foot view and really covering all the bases. And I think it would be something that would be a really useful tool in your story. I finished it not too long ago, and it's one of those books when you finish it and when you're done, you just kind of sit quietly in a room for a while. Mm-hmm. Because you've just been taking on an experience, but you learn something, but you're not entirely certain what it is. You just know that something needs to change.
I will check that out.
I highly recommend it. So, Talking to Strangers, I think that would fit really well into something along those lines. What you guys are talking about there, because it's an incrementalist perspective, meaning that he's talking about changing the system as opposed to an abolitionist perspective, which I think would be cool to help with some of the people who are a little skeptical, is giving them stepping stones. So I think that might be something that might be worth looking into.
Yeah, I will. Thank you.
Awesome. As we transition out of the segment, do you have anything else you want to tell anybody about your show, Frakkle, before we move on to another topic for the evening?
Well, I will just say, just from listening to your introduction, I probably need to actually come up with a catchy name for the show. Streaming on Twitch, like, the culture of Twitch is such that it's just like, you just have your channel and it's just known as your channel because you are the show. Like, that's typically how Twitch goes. But I'm realizing that, getting involved with Rogue Media and such, I probably need to think about branding a little bit in some capacity.
Well,
Don't
if
lose
you
your
want
mind
help,
too far down that.
there you go.
Yeah.
Let me know.
All right.
There we go. We'll trade help. We'll trade OBS help for branding help if you want.
Perfect. Thank you.
All right. Well, let's move on to our next segment. So I think we're going to do our answering conservative questions. And I say this because I know Hannah's talked a lot. But I really think we need to cover this because of the fact that there is so much to unpack here. So for those of you new to the show, answering conservative questions essentially is going to be us talking about a specific topic, and then we each kind of give a 3-minute or less answer to the question. So here we go.
Oh, he was doing a gimmick.
Oh, all right. Well, I dumped you from the stream because I thought you had to go pee. I thought that was the indication of the pee break that you needed.
I was watering.
No,
I
it
was
was
watering
just
the plants
10
that
minutes
are
of him
definitely
going,
not
"Meow."
marijuana plants. I was watering the plants that are definitely not marijuana plants that are all growing in my wonderful little greenhouse area here.
Nice.
So why are you defining them as not marijuana plants?
Because I live in Ohio and I am not allowed to do these kinds of things in Ohio.
So does that mean you have a secret basement with marijuana? You know what? We're going to stop talking about this, and I'm going to come visit
I have
you.
a basement with 2 tiny humans in it, and there's no good things happening in those rooms at all. They're insane little monsters who don't sleep ever, and they make your hair turn white. It's amazing.
All right. So tonight's answering conservative questions, the question of the hour is, why do liberals get offended when they see a lawful person open carrying a gun?
You want to put the picture up?
I will. Yep. You go ahead and start telling us a little bit about it.
So I was at the beach this weekend. That was our thing. I was sizzling. You can actually hear my skin sizzle because with the blue light on the screen here, I am actually see-through in most cases. But we were on the beach just hanging out, and a dude and a lady just approached with, a Chick-fil-A cup in hand and a towel in a bag, and they lay the towel out, and the dude is just sitting at the bench at the table, and I noticed that he has a sidearm, and then he decided that he was just gonna kind of lay down on the beach and put his hat on his head, and it's just like when I see that, I immediately become not happy or secure in my position that there's a good guy with a gun close by who will help me deal with people who are bad guys with guns that are coming to take my livelihood. I see that man as a threat, and I took this picture because you couldn't see his face or her face, and so we have that, and I mean, I guess you can kind of see a little kid in the background, but anyways, it's just one of those things where it's just like you see it and you're just like, that doesn't make me feel any more safe. And so my thoughts across the board on this one were basically in the end, it's not something that makes me feel safe. My wife, I had a post online. So if you go to our Facebook page, you can see this actual question that I had shared on Instagram, and basically my thoughts. But I just wanted to know, what is a gun? Kind of what is it? It's a tool. It's a tool for killing people. Essentially killing animals or destroying things. But if you break down its simplest function, it is essentially the condensed basic canon physics. It's a technical revolution. It essentially changed warfare significantly, and that was a huge deal. But the thing itself, the tool itself, is whether or not you have all kinds of things that you attach to it, meaning that it's protective or it's a strengthening thing or good for whatever. In the end, if you break it down to its basic necessity, it's a tool for destruction. And I find, that to me, when someone carries that, I see it as a thinly veiled threat to health and safety of all the people that are nearby this individual. So open carry to me is someone saying, I am more powerful than you. I am in control. You cannot challenge me. I am the powerful one. It's one of those things where it's just like an assertion of dominance. And that doesn't make me feel more comfortable or more happy. It feels like to me that this guy could be the bad guy. And if anything goes wrong, being a irrational creature as human primates are, we could have a problem. And this could be the guy that, had a bad day and decided to do something horrible. And I don't feel that this is good or not. And then also, if this guy was carrying, we'll go full D&D, he's carrying an axe or a sword, right, up to the beach, stick it in the sand right next to him. People are going to pull their children away from the guy carrying a battle axe at the park, or a chainsaw if you want to go doom on me. It just, nothing about this felt safe or good or happy or healthy. Okay, maybe he's the same skin tone as me, so maybe that would make me feel better, because I guarantee you the people on this beach would think completely differently if he would have been a minority carrying that gun. And that changes everything, but it shouldn't, because if we're talking about just basic gun rights, it shouldn't change anything, but it does. And so in Pennsylvania, in a purple state, but still close to MAGA country, this is one of those things that you see commonly, and it doesn't make me feel any safer.
Fair enough. Frakkle, what's your view on this?
So he touched on it a little bit already, but yes, the racial disparity is the thing that bothers me the most. So I, generally speaking, just as a concept, I don't per se mind the idea of open carrying. I mind how it is actually the reality of it in our society, which is to say, people like that are, conservatives especially, are interested in having guns because they have a very particular image of what a bad guy with a gun looks like. And that looks like people like Wilson Boogie Smith, who just this past week was executed by police in Minneapolis for having a gun. Gun laws themselves just get applied against minorities. Like, I know several people who illegally own firearms around here, who have unregistered ones and such. They will never be actually asked about them by police, even if they're open carrying them or anything. They'll never be license checked because, their skin tone is white. Gun laws are not applied against, good old white boys. They just aren't. I am, however, as a police abolitionist, I am very, at this time, I have to ideologically side with the right to open carry, because until police disarm, I absolutely do not want the laws set to keep the population disarmed. So it's complicated in that respect. But yeah, I don't agree with. I don't agree with the typical attitude of I need to carry this gun because some black man might come around that needs shooting, which is the typical attitude of that kind of individual.
Yeah.
All right, buddy.
I mean, first off, I want to address the whole offended thing, because we see that term getting thrown around. Anytime there's discourse, anytime, and again, maybe I'm just speaking more from my own personal experience, my own bubbles or whatever. Anytime you bring up any sort of an issue with these things, oh, you triggered? You snowflake? You triggered? From the same people who lose their minds because, oh my God, the gay people are holding hands. I wish I didn't have to see that. I wish I didn't have to see them existing and being human beings. The people who lose their mind over things, like actual human, reasonable, or basic human decency. It's never a good faith thing. So right off the bat, I'm writing off. It's not an offense. It's a simple making note of a problem in society. I don't have to be offended by something to think that it's problematic. So I don't know why we have to try to gaslight somebody and work them up. Oh wait, yes we do. Never mind. We're going to move on from that. And I was looking through the comments, and just because I hate myself a lot, and I punish myself for being a dirty boy by making myself read YouTube comments. If there's a hell and I go there, it will be nothing but a YouTube comment section, or Facebook comment section, really, because Facebook is a lot less anonymous in some regards anyways. So somebody responded, Nathan, you're on the page. I'm just going to use your name here.
Yes.
Mentioned something that I thought was, they used a term that was interesting to me, because it has some relevance to Canadian gun laws, which I'm pretty sure I've gone over why I think Canada has a slightly better handle on it than the States. We're not as bad, but we're still not as great either. We have various classes of firearms that you can and can't own. Now, I did a segment a while back when there was a shooting in Nova Scotia about action that was taken about firearms that were specifically banned. And of course, the the anti-gun law brigade were all up in arms saying, none of those would have stopped this shooting, blah, blah, blah. These were illegally obtained anyways. And it's like, you're missing the point. And it's starting to seem deliberate at this point. But in Canada, we have different tiers. We have your restricted, non-restricted, which I went over. And then we also have prohibited. Prohibited, basically, in order to even own memorabilia or I think broken down or unusable munitions that fall under prohibited, you actually have to have a specific license. And those are very, very difficult to acquire. You have to be, I actually don't even know the full qualifications. I just know that for the most part, the only people who have that license are high up military or military-esque, and they have a lot of familiarity with firearms, so they know a lot about safety. They also tend to be people with more education around them. And handle them.
They've been vetted.
I see what you did there,
yeah.
you punny bastard. So it's prohibited firearms, and it's just another layer of saying, certain things should not be accessible to the public at large because there's a lack of general education, and it's really damn dangerous. You could get hurt. It's the same reason why you can't order certain chemicals without certain certifications, qualifications, etc. It's just because you need to be able to handle this without killing yourself or anybody around you. And then we go into this whole idea of, guns are for destructive purposes. The sports where guns are used, they're used to destroy a target. So that's still a tool of destruction. And there's nothing you could do with a gun that you say couldn't be done even with an archery, like a bow and arrow, a crossbow, shit like that. So guns, again, really aren't doing everything that we think they're doing. And the whole, to draw back to the whole fantasy of, the lone gunman showing up and saving the day. Well, how often do we hear about that happening? I mean, exactly. Given how often we hear that as an argument that's cited, you would think that it happened more often because they would celebrate the shit out of it. Well,
it's a confirmation bias.
Well, there's that too. Yeah. So it's not offended. It's an acknowledgement that one, there's danger. Two, that's somebody who's just leaving the gun out in the open is not somebody who knows how to properly handle a firearm. First of all. And that's another issue. As somebody
who's thinking about sand in my Glock 45, I was like, ooh,
yeah. But as I've outlined,
I'm just an engineer. I'm just a mechanical engineer and a hunter and a guy who understands machining. And I'm a maker, and I could make a AR if I wanted to by hand, like completely ghost gun kind of stuff, which they do all the time. So a lot of these guns and things like that don't even exist.
Fair enough.
I completely lost where I was going with that one, so I guess I'll just wrap up by saying I'm not offended. I'm just aware that guy's an idiot and is not handling that firearm safely, so that's not exactly somebody you should be using as a support for your argument in favor of open carry and gun laws.
I think that's the important thing here, right? Is that, and really my opinion doesn't differ from any of y'all, so there's no point in me ranting for 3 minutes because it'll be even longer than that. So I agree with you. There you go. That being said, let's move on to the next topic. So Hansel, you had a science segment called Dark Matter Posited, Stimulated, and potentially found not in Futurama. What does that mean, man?
All right, so I don't know if you guys follow just general scientific news, but recently they've been using a series of scientific simulations to try to find where and what dark matter and dark energy is. So the concept dark matter and dark energy, the reason they're called dark is simply because they don't know what it is. So it isn't like some kind of like you can't see it, or like when we use the semantics of the word dark, that is not essentially what we're getting, but that's usually what most people go towards. And so like dark matter itself is making up a massive portion of the total amount of I think it's 40% of the total amount of matter in the universe. And what they're trying to do is find that, because dark energy itself is even more elusive, and that makes up an even larger section of the universe as far as total energy is concerned and thermodynamics. But what they did was they looked into simulating the entirety of the universe, trying to find all the gravitational effects and everything, and they was like, this is just too much. And so they started using this machine learning system, and inside that machine learning system, they found these things called dark matter filaments. And so the first time they can see them, and what that means essentially is it looks like there's a bridge that shows there's an additional mass beyond what the galaxy clusters contain. So they look at two masses of galaxy clusters, and they're just like, why is there so much extra gravity in here in the middle where there technically shouldn't be a whole lot? There's something there that's showing a gravitational effect. And so dark matter has a gravitational effect. And the reason they know it has a gravitational effect is because of gravitational lensing, which when something is super, super dense, if light passes through it, it curves the light around. It's one of the things that was postulated in Einstein's relativity. And it's really cool. But so like that's like the basics of like the hard science that was going on here. But I guess if you guys, have you ever heard of like any like universal simulations, like trying to simulate just what's going on in our galaxy and then pushing it out even further into the universe itself? Is this something that you guys follow at all? Silence, chirps, crickets.
Nope. Sorry.
Yes and no. I do if it shows up on Reddit on a high level. Otherwise, no.
It's because like we hear about dark matter and dark energy as like a thing that exists. Like they're like, oh yeah, we definitely know it's out there, but it's more like there's a hole, and that's why it's dark, and we don't know what to fill that hole with. But it doesn't interact with any of the standard energy and particles that we have in the standard model, the antiprotons, protons, all that kind of stuff. And so one of the issues that we run into is like, if it doesn't interact with anything, if it doesn't do anything, as far as like, you know, looking at things like gluons and some of the other really non-effective particles inside the standard model, where they're just like, well, what do we do to look into this? And so like the idea of a simulation in machine learning is really cool, because if you use machine learning, essentially you just have to give it information and then it will create the simulation. So like if you look at the way they like to create a lot of simulations, and like video games is a great example, and this is something that you guys will both understand, is just like you have to create the engine, the Unreal Engine. You have to create the engine itself. But with machine learning, they give the information they have. We measured this galaxy. It has this much matter. It has this much mass. It has this much gravitational pull. It's moving at this speed with relative to this other mass. It's moving at this speed with relative to ours. And you created that triangle. Now we have speed, and we have a directional vector, something in some direction. And so that thing is moving X, Y, Z inside the Cartesian coordinate plane, and we can track it. We know it's going somewhere. So they feed all that kind of like rough data. All these things are moving, and everything that we've been able to observe is now inside this system, and they're moving around. And so with machine learning, they build a model, they use the information about this distribution and the motion of the galaxies to predict the distribution of dark matter. So this is I have 4 links that I had on here that'll be in the description, but the one from Sci News is the one I'm currently in, and what they're talking about is essentially they created a large set of galaxy simulations called Illustris-TNG, which included galaxies, gases, and other visible matter, as well as dark matter. And then the map successfully reproduced known prominent structures in the local universe. So like when they would find like a string of, you know, gases, and they would find a string of visible things in between galaxies. So they're like, are those galaxies connecting to each other? And so inside the region of space containing the Milky Way and the nearby galaxies in the Virgo cluster, this essentially is this void, and they call it the local void. But what they're doing when they use this system is they're able to simulate. If you look at the picture here, all these arrows are pointing in the general direction of movement and density and gravitational intensity. And so like
kind of looks like sperm. If we're being honest.
I was thinking more of a topographic map, seeing low spots in the space-time continuum. But sure, pal, you go ahead and anthropomorphize that thing as hard as you can. But the red areas are going to be, they're going to have high density of dark matter. Essentially, these are going to be gravitational wells inside the sheet of space and time. And so it's pretty cool stuff, because like the idea is that like if you had a sheet of space time completely and totally stretched out, right, you have two heavy bowling balls or whatever in there, but all of a sudden you see kind of like an extra tunnel, a trench, a connection between those two bowling balls that you're like, there's nothing in between those two bowling balls. There should just be the two low spots, and then the overall. But we see this connection. That's what when they're saying this. They're running this simulation, and they're like, "There's something there. We don't know what it is, but there's something there." And when they say that, well, what do you do in science? Essentially, you create your thesis. You create a prediction, and then you go out and you use basic experimentation to measure it. And so that's what they did. And according to the there's a Guardian article that's talking about this is something that is it's basically challenging Einstein's theory of general relativity, and it's basically saying that the gravitational forces are what created clumps, right? So like Einstein's version of relativity says that matter should be clumped, just chunks, and it should slowly accrete, and it should be locked in. But through the calculations by this team, they found that distribution of matter is broadly consistent with those predictions in the standard model, but it's not a perfect fit. The quotation directly is, if you look into the universe, matter isn't as clumpy as expected. There are hints that it's smoother. The idea that this could matter, it would be something that would be like, well, if we're supposed to have all these little pots everywhere, but everything is actually kind of less gradient and less deep in certain spots, and there are wells that we can't explain, that would be really one of the only places that Einstein's theory of relativity doesn't actually fit. And so this is a massive, massive story. If it can be proven that that the general theory of relativity or the idea of quantum mechanics can't particularly either one of them cover this, that this could be something that can be an indicator of some kind of universal gravitational theory, because this is kind of in between both of them, which is really cool stuff. So like these guys were just, this is, and the Guardian is just a pretty safe place to hang out. And it says, another quote on it was, it may seem like a relatively small thing, but if these hints are true, it may mean there's something wrong with Einstein's theory. And that's one of the great pillars of physics. So I don't know. I'm really interested to see if something like this actually comes through. This is like, Higgs boson, we're talking Nobel Prize level discoveries on here. And so like, if you guys, so how do you typically get your news? So like, this is the thing for me, is like, how do you typically get your news? Do you just go to like an aggregate? Do you let Google say, hey, you've been looking at this kind of stuff, what do you think about this? Or do you just kind of just go to like a channel that's the consistent channel that you go to? Because I want to postulate something on this. I don't know, whoever wants to go first.
For my part, I follow a few main news outlets like Reuters, AP News, and I also keep an eye on general headlines and then do Googling to find out more about a particular subject. However, admittedly, my area of actual active involvement and research trends not to be in physics. So that's just,
yeah.
It's not for lack of interest. It is so far out my wheelhouse. I don't even have the educational background to really appreciate what I'm reading most of the time. Yeah. So these are things that are more curios to me than something that I could actively discuss.
What about you, Keith? Do you ever come across this in any of your general science searching?
Not really. I mean, I get a lot of my science news from podcasts, just because I tend to, a lot of my news is filled up with a lot of, what can be simply summed up as nonsense. But that's the world we live in these days. Is most news is just kind of nonsense. So it's not nearly enough.
Frakkle here, our esteemed gentle guest, he was essentially talking about politics being an area of ignorance where people are hesitant to try to grow in that area, and they find themselves hearing someone who says, and they know, right? I know climate change isn't real. I know that that fossil fuel energy isn't depleting. I know that green energy is way too expensive to ever think. And that kind of thing is relatively connected to the idea that physics is this like deep and difficult thing. The reason I say that is because using Google for your news, it's like using the simulation that they're talking about in this particular story, is that it's a machine learning thing that keeps track of what you look at and what you're interested in. And if you click on enough scientific articles, it'll take you to things like Science Daily. It'll take you to places like New Atlas. And these kinds of places are associated with places like the University of Michigan and they have these articles they're usually cited, and then you'll hear something like I fucking love science.com, and you'll see those guys grab that, condense it, turn it into a simple shareable page, and now we have something on there. So like those basic things are like, it's like if you just dip your toes in every once in a while and let the aggregate that is Google, if you use it, if you're a DuckDuckGo person, you don't want anybody creeping on your your search history, that's fine too.
Bing,
but
sir?
I found that
Oh, come on. Nobody uses Bing.
Yeah. The only people that use Bing are the people who think Internet Explorer
so
is an actual browser. But in the end, so like using that basic machine learning, what it'll do is it sees the kind of science content that you're interested in, and it says, okay, this is the kind of science content that I'll feed you. And you'll find that you run into stuff that's more entertainment and science connected. And I really recommend that. The reason being is because the final section of this from Science Daily is essentially these guys, they're talking about the distribution of dark matter and how much difficult it is, and how the like the large scale structure in the universe is growing in complexity and all this stuff. This one was something that when I read through it, I actually found myself going, I'm one of the contents says the research team then applied their model to real data from the local universe in the Cosmic Flow 3 data catalog. The catalog contains comprehensive data about the distribution and movement of more than 17,000 galaxies in the vicinity of the Milky Way within 200 megaparsecs. I felt like I was reading a Star Trek or a Star Wars article. You know what I mean? Like I just got slammed by a bunch of data so hard and so intense. But when you see something like that, like the potentiality for like just like pulling back, and then all of a sudden the next section you see says the researchers believe they can improve the accuracy of these maps by adding more galaxies, and you're like, okay, I get that. So planned astronomical surveys for information, or for example using the new James Webb Space Telescope. And someone could say, like, I don't know what that is. What's the James Webb Space Telescope? And then they click on it and they read a little bit and they see this new massive thing that's coming out there, that when it comes on, it'll be able to pick things like that. You see the deep space pictures of the Hubble Space Telescope. You see what that thing's bringing in, the unbelievable information that it has. And then using the James Webb, when that thing gets out, it's going to be able to do stuff that we are only now just starting to do as far as comprehension with what Hubble did decades ago. And so like the idea here that we're simulating using basic mathematical and theoretical science what's happening, these weird filaments and these connections and this gravitational lensing that bends light and does all this stuff, and it's just like, that's so much. But if you get the 10,000 foot view that, hey, we have this really cool thing that's coming out, and this new satellite will go out there and it'll be able to show stuff, but also here are some really cool pictures that kind of illustrate this connection and the fact that there shouldn't be anything between these galaxies, but there's a little bit of dust and there's way more density, way more gravity than we would expect. So like, what's there? And that question is easy enough and simple enough for people and little girls like my 3 and 5 year old daughter, who I actually got a piece of cloth out and I put 2 marbles on there. And I showed them the space-time bending. And I showed them this is what happens when a planet is in outer space and something gets too close to it, I dropped another smaller marble in and it rolled from the middle right to the nearest one. Like, these are the basic ideas of education that we're talking about when we're talking about educating people about politics, that we also need to work on for educating people about physics, and that those kinds of things. So like, this stuff is so cool, but it would be really cool if, you know, we found ways. Like, we always look for storytellers, right? Like in the atheist community, we had storytellers, and then they all told bad stories, and then we were like, yeah, no, we're done. And then the same thing happens with certain different political and other I don't know what the some of the political pundits or personalities out there that you just kind of let me down. I'm gonna move on to the next one, but like, I don't know. It's just like the storytellers and some of the people that can really effectively tell these stories. It's super, super useful. And so, like, Frakkle, if that's something that you're doing, is telling a nice story to help people basically understand something in their language, using something relative to what they're doing, that's awesome. And like, if I can do the same thing to someone who's just like, I don't understand basic physics, I don't understand galactic movements and stuff, but if like I can make it somewhat interesting, like, you know, using basic science, that's kind of the goal. So like, if everyone would just take an area that they think they can kind of break down to the explain it like I'm five area, this one is one of those ones where it's like, this is some of the stuff at the absolute forefront of human knowledge. It's so absolutely ridiculously complex, you can't even understand it. But if you can grasp the concept of what they're looking for, you can get excited about it. Maybe you want to go to Mars. Maybe you want to do this. Maybe you want to, your young kid will want to go, want to reach sublunar orbit and be the first person to build a base on the moon. I don't know. Like, all that kind of stuff is stuff that would be super awesome if more people will look that way instead of towards the guy at the beach who's got a handgun in his pants.
Yeah. And I think I think the thing here, Hannah, right, is with dark matter. So the concept behind this is so high level to some extent. We could walk down a million bunny trails with it, right? Mm-hmm. So it's the illusion, it's the love of this specific idea of expanding our universe. That's what is there to fall in love with. That's what's there. I watch Futurama. They use dark matter to fuel spaceships, right? Yeah, you bring up an article and I go, when am I going to get my dark matter fueled spaceship? I just want to leave. I want to leave America because sometimes America sucks so bad
I don't want to be here. I want the hover skateboard from Back to the Future. Give me that. I'll call that good, and we'll move on.
Fair enough. So let's move on to our next topic. And again, I think one of the big things here is through science education is to help people understand what we are capable of as humans. But we still have to deal with people complaining about Fauci's emails.
Boomer emails. That's what we're doing right now.
I'll tell you what. I kind of did the same thing you did. I had vacation time last week, and I turned my phone off essentially. Like, I did no social media. My kid graduated. I stayed out of Discord, out of Reddit, everything. And then I got a message from somebody that said, hey, looks like your kid's graduating. Congrats. I was like, thanks. He's like, oh, by the way, did you see Fauci's emails? What? No. Oh, they got so much dirt in them, you can't even believe it. So has anybody on here gone through that? Anybody? All right. Yeah. There you go. Frakkle. You're first, man. You're first. If you're our first contestant on Spin the Wheel of Fauci's emails.
Yeah, so first of all, the conspiracy theory machine, vast majority of them haven't read any of the archive that was released. What they have is a few fragments of statements taken out of their original context and editorialized and turned into part of the outrage machine. This is the new Clinton email thing. It's it's a bunch of, yes, political writing because he was serving a political post, and the CDC at the time was receiving a lot of political pressure from different, different organizations and such, from the Trump administration to states to the World Health Organization. There are indeed some, like, what appear at first glance contradictions in some of the statements that he said. But if you actually follow timelines, because information changes over time, he wasn't operating with perfect information in February and March. So the fact that statements changed in, April, May compared to the advice he was giving in February, March is not news, but is being made out to be this whole, he was lying to the American public about it. It's just nonsense. And it's a very boring read, honestly. And it's being stretched to do a lot of work that is not actually there, in my opinion.
I don't know. For me, when it comes to this, like the idea of what they're talking about essentially, and what Frakkle is mentioning here is essentially the changing of the narrative. When the CDC or Fauci or anybody updated their information based on new evidence, which is also known as the scientific method, which a majority of people who are interpreting this information don't particularly believe in. So one of the issues we have there is the fact that the people are just saying that you are unable to change your mind because I have nothing but a system of absolutes that I operate on. And the idea that changing my mind or changing information is just atrocious and insane. And so the thing that I hear the most about these emails is the idea that Fauci is associated essentially in any way connected to the Wuhan lab funding. And so what we're looking at here is that Dr. Fauci being part of the disease apparatus inside the entirety of research itself was in some way connected financially, funding globally to research labs. Well, Dr. Fauci is one of the leading scientists in this particular disease market, whatever it was, is he's one of the leaders in the entirety of the United States. The United States leads the whole world and a whole bunch of things in this area. We have money and funding that goes all over the place. And China, hey, we actually kind of work with China on a bunch of stuff. It's a problem in certain areas. It's also beneficial. It's a mutually beneficial scenario on a bunch of others when it comes to medical research and stuff like that. We, as the four of us, we cannot be entirely certain that there isn't some kind of, like, what do they call it? Expanded gain. If any of you know it, it's the idea that you basically evolve a virus quickly to see if it gains any particular abilities or.
I know it's
yeah, you know what it is though. Yeah, it's the idea. It's like something gain theory or something along those lines. I can't remember exactly off the top of my head right now. But what they're doing essentially is trying to take a virus, something like HIV, and they gain abilities to that virus and see if those abilities that it would gain, if controlled in a controlled environment, can be useful. Essentially genetically modifying X, Y, Z, because viruses are very good at that kind of thing. This is research that's normal as long as it's done safely. And so the idea that Fauci and funding and all this stuff is maybe connected to Wuhan before, if there wasn't a mistake, if any of that is valid, because as time has gone on, we have sort of kind of said, hey, something looks a little fishy. China was particularly, not particularly connective when it came to, like, trying to go through all of the research of what actually happened, where the pandemic started, or if it was a natural occurrence from bats and wet markets and stuff like that. And so, like, is there a connection to a leak? that's something that I've seen a lot of people saying, that anything bad or anything contradictory coming from Fauci immediately confirms the Wuhan was a total,
Right.
man-made whatever. Like, I like the idea of a slippery slope. It makes me feel better, but I don't think it's one of the best ways to find the truth. And so that's kind of what I see on this. So like the Fauci ouchie whatever email situation here is that everybody's grasping for straws. They find anything that confirms their bias, and they immediately go back to, this is a lab leak, this is Chinese, this is China virus, and all that kind of stuff. In my opinion, if there was a mistake, this is a massive problem, and this could potentially turn into a huge deal with biohazard ethics and when it comes to the UN and all that. But the entire UN would have to absolutely get together and sanction China. So I don't really know what'll happen out of this, but if there's anything valid there, that's the problem, and that's what a lot of people are yelling about, that I've heard anyways.
The concern that I primarily have is when this much noise is made of jumping to the conclusion, it muddies any potential investigation from even happening. Like, China did cooperate with the World Health Organization investigators to a large extent, but if we are preemptively saying we know that there's something sketchy going on there, they're probably going to be disinclined from either disinclined from cooperating, or they will know
Iraq has weapons of mass destruction.
Right. It doesn't establish the truth first and then work the problem. If there was something that happened at the lab, then deal with it. But this jumping to the conclusion and working what if scenarios based on that assumption is a problematic approach.
It's bad science. You massage the data to confirm your thesis, which is always a failure.
Right. Also kind of a diplomatic thing. Sorry.
I don't know. I was just say, what's Canada think on here? Do they think Dr. Fauci is just like this monster who's in bed with Bill Gates
I mean, you guys have not disproved that he and Bill Gates didn't go to school together and didn't form some secret best friendships things where they decided that they were going to take over the world with a virus. First it was Bill Gates' Microsoft, and then brothers. Except for the fact that there's no way they could have gone to school together. But
is this the part where we hashtag Epstein or something?
Hey, he did not kill himself. Trump had it done because Trump has mafia ties. That's how he got his buildings done.
After you get your second shot, you'll stop worrying about Bill Gates.
No,
God, I hope so. I would really like the autism to take over. Andrew Wakefield promised me that, and I'm still sitting here with ADD. So I'd like a little more autism, please.
I'm definitely not as adept at computation as Rain Man yet. So,
one of my favorite things from social media years ago was one of the podcasters that I still listen to. He goes, "I got my flu shot today." Threw a bunch of matches on the floor. Comes back to him. He's just looking. He goes, 7? I want a refund. And I'm just like, oh. It was one I had to explain to enough of my friends that it made me rethink the people I surrounded myself with.
Yeah, it happens from time to time. I don't know, Tanner, what do you think about Fauci's emails? Are they all BS? I mean, is it really?
I mean, obviously, you've read 3,000 of the pages here.
Nah.
It's a dry read. Good Lord.
You're quiet. You're quiet. Yeah.
He's got his mic on mute. There we go.
I think
is that better?
Yeah, there you go. Now we can.
Okay. Sorry. So the answer to your question is I did not read them all. I read probably 30% of them.
Wow.
And I did.
It's like reading the Bible.
No, it's not. Good Lord.
That's
at least in the Bible there's like weird sex trysts and like violence. Fauci's emails are like, "Hey man, what do you think about this serum?" Like, it's just not particularly interesting.
Yeah, like there's nobody peeing on the president here, so I'm just really
All right. So the issue that they brought up was masks don't work. Wuhan is a lab leak, and however you say that name, was a success.
Hydroxychloroquine.
There you go.
Hydroxychloroquine. Oh, that's another thing. Frakkle, by the way, is that Tanner's pronunciation of difficult words is one of like the running jokes that we really enjoy here.
I'm not good at words.
Well, hydroxychloroquine is a particularly long word, but this is a great article, actually. I was just scanning through this while you were going through it, so yeah.
So, APR actually talks about what do we learn, right? Because there is... The idea here is we have an individual who has worked with the National Institute of Allergies, right, and Infectious Diseases. They're a very old organization. I get people want to buy into this conspiracy theory thing, but essentially, you're looking at somebody that has spent his whole life working in and for the system. And the idea that this person is going to fabricate a bunch of lies, that threshold of understanding that demographic is so off, it's not even funny. Because think about it. Really, think about this. If you made, let's just say, hundreds of thousands of dollars, you have a doctoral education, are you honestly going to lie to a bunch of people for no more money and for rhetoric from Trump to be yelled at? I mean, think about it. Are you honestly going to take the abuse for no more money? Now, I'd understand if, like, he had 17 book deals in the works, if he had his own podcast.
It's the same thing with, like, the Gates thing. Is like there's funding and investments and stuff. So, like, I don't know about any of the divestment requirements that they would have for his position, but like they're basically saying that like he's been in the system so long that he has money invested in places and he's going to make money by going in the direction that he particularly wants to go as opposed to where the science actually leads,
which would be fine if they can demonstrate it, but his emails don't demonstrate that. And I get the conspiracy theory aspect, but if you cannot demonstrate it, I'm not going to believe it. His emails, like Frakkle talked about, do call out him saying something in February about masks not working. Now, 4 months later, the science comes out and says, well, hold on a second, you're probably incorrect. And we can critique a little bit. The aspect that they did not call him out for that, and he did not have to actually address that publicly. Now, we can also blame right-wing pundits and Trump for not addressing that. None of these people brought this up. So even though Fauci was saying these things, nobody brought it up to call him out. So now we're a year and a half in, and you want to call him out and say, well, he corrected his statement. He made an apology. Does that alleviate him from the issues? No. Should he lose his job? Maybe. But it's not for the pure fact of claiming something that isn't true. It's because he did something based on limited knowledge and research. And us as a public institution or the doctorate get to make a decision whether he gets to keep his job or not. But that doesn't mean the conspiracy theories are correct. It just means that he made a poor decision based on the information he had. Could we crucify him? Sure. Does it mean the conspiracy theories are true? Absolutely not. And that's my big issue with that.
Yeah, I want to push on a couple points there. Broadly speaking, agree, but there's an interesting thing about the mask that I find very disingenuous about the people who are attacking Fauci over this, which is the CDC and Fauci have no authority, they have no teeth to mandate mask wearing. So even if earlier on he had come out and said, and he did say that, you know, masks potentially could be useful, they just didn't recommend them for everyone to be wearing at the time, which is true. But even if they had, we still had a huge swath of the population that once masks were mandated refused to do it. And it's the same people who are attacking him for not saying that we should have been wearing masks to begin with, which I find very dishonest.
Yeah,
Very
true.
dishonest.
he said he didn't say to do it in time when we should have done it, but I didn't want to do it because he said to do it.
Right. Like if he had said to do it earlier, they still wouldn't have done it.
Yeah.
But it's the other thing is I do want to push against the idea of the appeal to a long career as just a de facto reason to believe him. I generally trust Fauci, but it's not because he's just been in office for a long time. I think that kind of thinking can lead towards problematic areas. I generally trust him because his track record is pretty solid. He was there through the the swine flu, the avian flu, all of which were contained because they were able to make effective recommendations that were actually supported. And this is the biggest thing. Fauci never had to go out and talk about this shit before because he always worked for an administration that took the CDC seriously and would disseminate the message for them. So stuff like with the avian flu and the swine flu, the information was given by the CDC to like the executive branch to do with what it will. They disseminated it to the media in press releases and such. That then got out to the public. And that model depoliticizes the process and makes it less partisan. The problem this time was he was working for an administration that was anti-science. So he himself had to go to the podium. Before this, nobody knew who the fuck Fauci was. We didn't need to. We don't care. That their job is as an advisory role, not to speak to the public and dictate policy. So that's a few other points that I wanted to touch on.
So
I definitely agree.
I agree a little bit. I understand your hesitancy to trust him if he's been in position for a long time. I think the difference is that it's not a trust because he's in a political position, right? But because of his degree and his science background, right? So I can agree with you. We should never just trust a politician who's been in office for forever. Agreed 100% on that because I would overthrow the government in a heartbeat.
I borrow Hitchens' stance on politicians is that why should you trust someone whose job it is to make you like them?
Yep. But to your point, that's the whole point, right, buddy?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Sorry, I made the mistake of clicking on one of the links within the NPR article about Fauci's opening day, July 2020, in a red Nats mask, making the first pitch. They said it's not a great throw. And I realized it was a YouTube video, and I'm watching it thinking it would just be a little bad. No, it was terrible.
No. Yeah.
And I'm watching that. That's why I burst out laughing. I promise it was nothing anybody said. It was just because I watched a guy try to throw that way, but throw it that way.
Yeah.
And I'm that uncoordinated. And I guess he's, a lot older. So I'll give him points on that.
It's a rare thing for a truly scientific mind to appreciate all the fluid mechanics necessary for a baseball to go to the place it's supposed to go to. And Fauci himself doesn't understand those things, and it was very frustrating to watch that because I was hoping he'd come on to just do a strike, just do a hard strike. Like I want to see ex-presidents just rip something in there 70 plus miles an hour. I want to see, you know what I mean, just like
so. In other words, the video that I showed a while back of The Rock for president. If it's going to become a cult of celebrity, anyways, then you get a president who could really throw a ball because he used to play football.
I know he
Stop.
did.
Stop, buddy.
I don't know
Stop.
the
Stop your predicting
muscles.
things we don't want. Stop doing
No,
it.
I'm not the Simpsons.
Don't. You are.
It's coming.
You
It's
are
coming.
100%, bro. Don't do that shit.
It's coming.
We don't need
It's
that.
coming.
I like The Rock, but I don't want him as president. I like Danny DeVito. I don't want him as president. I like It's Always Sunny, but I would not like to live that life my whole life. Thank you.
It was just a callback.
Well, I don't know. I
mean,
if given the choice between Donald Trump or
Oh, my
Dwayne Elizondo, Mountain Dew, Herbert Camacho, it might be difficult for the American people to make that decision.
All right. You're killing me. You're killing me, Smalls.
I know. It's coming. It's coming. I just.
So we have the link in the description if you want to read through the emails. I don't really. Yeah. This is more of an opinion segment. I honestly don't want to spend 4 hours going through the emails. Well, I kind of do. I think it would be fun. We'd be like Frakkle. We'd be like Frakkle. 7-hour shows. Yeah, he's used to it. He's sitting here thinking, "Shit, you guys are going to be done in under 2 hours. What am I going to do with my night?" He's not going to know what to do.
Well, I also read the entire Mueller report and when that came out and all this stuff. Oof. They're
how fast do you read? Damn, that's impressive.
When you sit down, you can get through things. You just have to slog through it.
Fair enough.
I actually have ADD, so I'm going to argue on that.
Okay.
I would fall asleep though. It would be great nap material.
All right. So let's move into the final segment. I'll be honest, I was thinking we could spend a whole John Oliver segment and cover this, but it's not worth it because in the reality, I just have a really hard time anybody taking this seriously because it's all right, it's feeding into your bias. That's what it is. You're feeding into this bias of I have to essentially believe the Republican Party. And that's just fake. Just fake.
Rather than trying to cover the emails, I would strongly recommend, just to be an effective message, I would strongly recommend there's a video by H. Bomber Guy called A Measured Response to the Anti-Vax Movement. Let's see. Vaccines, A Measured Response. And I'll show you that link. But it goes into the history of the anti-vax movement itself and shows the roots of it just being a complete fraud quack that wanted to sell his own vaccine rather than the one that was in Britain, that was currently being used in Britain. And he wanted to make millions of pounds off of that. And the study that they did was horrific and involved a lot of child abuse and stuff.
I didn't hear that.
He does a very good breakdown.
Andrew Wakefield. It's a horrible read.
I remember
Andrew Wakefield.
We went through the study in one of my science classes. I pissed off my teacher because I already knew about it when she started bringing up the topic, but I didn't realize that child abuse was involved. I know
this is the perfect connection that they were waiting for, like a global thing where they could really sink their teeth in when it became political. It's pretty bad.
Well,
so,
I mean,
look it up.
This always happens though. I mean, back in 1918 during the whole flu, then there were political movements that were similar to the anti-maskers we have today. So it's not a new phenomenon to act against everybody who ate tomatoes in 1857 died too. What's the big deal, right? God, you have no idea how long I've been waiting to use that line. But yeah, so it's something that I think is just part of our society. You know, it's just hardwired into us.
Yeah.
All right. Let's move into our quick save segment. So my quick save for the week is After the Revolution. It is essentially a novel, which is historical fiction. After the Revolution is a novel about North America roughly 20 years after the collapse of the old United States. In the Republic of Texas, a failing libertarian rump state, a Christian doministic militia suddenly sweeps into power, disrupting the lives of 3 protagonists. And they essentially have 3 chapters. So if you don't know who Behind the Bastards is, you should immediately stop watching us. We suck compared to them. And go over and watch or listen to Robert Evans. And he's very good at what he does. Essentially, he's this long-form journalist who has been involved in covering politics and political revolutionary actions for the last 15 years. And he is really, really good at what he does, honestly. But this book is his like attempt at I call it science fiction because I don't know what else to call it. Like, I don't know if historical fiction is really a good, accurate, metaphor for this, but that's essentially what this is. And he releases his podcast all the time, twice a week. This is like a supplementary release that he's releasing at the same time, and it's amazing. And if you want to listen to, like, if you listen to Audible, this shit's free. Like, seriously, like, you can listen to this for free on iTunes or Google Cast or whatever people use. That's not Apple products, because that's the only product I know.
Or you could wait until you see it at your local library and support them too.
You could. He has not announced if he's going to put a actual physical copy in place or not, though. Just so you know. But he has 3 chapters out. If you have not read this, like, honestly, like again, he's probably one of my favorite people to go to for podcasts. And this specific book actually kind of tickles my fancy, probably more than it should. I don't know. Maybe more than it should. That's probably the word for it.
So
anyway,
it's because of him that I learned how bad Ben Shapiro is of a writer and how disconnected from reality he is. Because Robert Evans, to do some, like, I don't want to say filler episodes with a negative connotation. It's just he decided to do episodes where they read Ben Shapiro's book, and in the opening statement, it tells you just how little Ben Shapiro knows about the human body, because he thinks somebody that is 6'2", 220 pounds is a bear of a human being. I'm a twig, and I'm not exactly tiny, so maybe learn a little bit more about the human body works there before you go start talking about how a wet vagina is a yeast infection, like your wife actually said that, instead of you're just trying to validate what you said.
All right. Frakkle, what was your quick save for the week? With the ad blocker.
With the ad blocker, nice. Mine was an independent article that was covering new laws in Montana against fossil fuel protesters. This is aimed specifically at indigenous people and climate activists. They don't want to have another no DAPL, basically. And so a little bit of background. Property damage, criminal property damage, typically is at absolute most, it's up to maximum of 10 years in prison. And that's if damage exceeds 10,000. Now, they want to say if damage exceeds 1,500, 30 years in prison. They also are wanting to go after anyone who funds any activist groups that are associated with any protest where damage happens. They want to shut down people from obstructing operations. So that also comes now with a jail sentence. So that's trespassing law, which you don't normally get 18 months in prison for. So yeah, they've basically carved out an exception and created a massive sweeping set of legislation on behalf of oil executives to be hyper punitive against indigenous populations that are trying to protect their lands from an ever encroaching network of pipelines that are destroying our environment.
Of obsolete fuel.
Yeah, of a completely obsolete and financially defunct
energy source.
Yeah, energy source.
It will be defunct in no time.
Because, let's face it, our oil industry is only propped up because we subsidize the hell out of it. It is not actually economically viable.
Oh, don't get Hannah going. Stop. We're going to get Hannah going. It will have 7 hours here.
I could talk to Hannah about that all day, I'm sure.
Well, we'll have to schedule another podcast because we don't do 7-hour podcasts anymore. No offense.
Hearing aid batteries would die.
One last note I wanted to add about that. That one is part of 226 anti-protest bills that have been attempted across the country. 34 of those have been enacted, and 59 are pending. So yeah,
connecting them to all the anti-vote laws and everything else, we're seeing a resurgence, an intense resurgence, and all of that kind of restrictive behavior. Because guess who lost last time?
And let me tell you, you lose the right to protest, you are then in a very, very rough spot.
Yep. Well, hence why I believe Nazis should be able to protest, but I should be able to punch them.
Yeah.
I'm not saying you should tell me it's legal. I'm just going to go punch them. I'll run. I'm going to hit a couple, and I'm going to run best I can. Anybody that wants to see me punch Nazis, send me the Nazi rallies for, Michigan for this year. We'll see how many times can Chris go to jail?
Tanner, does it look like any time that Squirrely Dan told Wayne that his sister was hot, and then you had to run away?
Nope. It'll be the exact opposite. The difference would be like when Wayne goes after the Hicks or not the Hicks. I'm sorry. Goes after the Skids, and then they cower away. I'd be Wayne, and then when the Skids come back with 17 people, and it's like, I'm gonna hit you. I'm gonna get hit a couple times, and then I'm gonna run. It's like that one fight from season 4.
Frakkle, I'm guessing this has something to do with Canadian TV.
Letterkenny.
Yeah. So if you're not a fan of that, you have no idea, because I have no idea.
If you've never watched Letterkenny, we need to talk.
I told you I wasn't that weird. That's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking about right there.
Oh, God.
All right. So the next quick save for tonight is the Earth in color?
1950s, colleague. We want our controversies back.
I don't know. This is so like, I mean, if you guys are familiar with eye bleach or any of those other kind of things, it's like a warm and fuzzy thing when you see it, and you're just like, that just made me feel good. So like, I guess kill the audio, but like, these are all pre-1940 videos that were taken. Mm-hmm. So like, we hear about black and white photos, we hear about that kind of stuff a long time ago, and this was America a long time ago, just with actual working color video. And it's just,
I bet it's only white people.
Oh, I guarantee it is. I mean, we're looking at the economic distribution or whatever, but like, and it's like just like weird, like, why are women in bathing suits shooting bows and arrows? It's just
white
in
people.
The end,
America,
yeah. White people,
white America.
I don't know how to shoot a bow.
Like, it starts off with like,
blow up my hair.
Yeah. So like, but like, if you look into just like the basic technology and things that were happening a long time ago, it's like just jump through another section a little bit later on. You can see some of the stuff that's going on. But
is it more white people shooting bows?
Not entirely. So it's
okay.
We're looking
There's a
at,
duck.
We're looking
it's
at,
not a couple it's fine.
Scenic environments. Just click around in a few places. So like, I mean, it's a winterscape and what appears to be like white New York City or something. But like, again, it's 1939 and 1940. Black people probably weren't allowed on the ice at that point, or whatever ridiculous reason it was for segregation. But like, these are the kinds of things you look at, and like people like, this was life way back when everything is so completely different and so whatever. But it's not really like, if you can go downtown, any major metropolitan area, and you can see people doing these kinds of things. We as humans haven't changed that much. Our past is our future, our future is our past. It's all connected. In the level of differentiation when we look at like what we used to do versus what we do now. Like, this ancient video looks every bit like any stupid ESPN Ocho video you would watch where like, come on,
the ESPN 8 out of this.
I'm gonna throw dodgeball under the rug. But in the end, it's just, there's so much stuff that's happening in here that is concurrently and consistently now. The only difference is you see the evolution when it comes to the people that are allowed to do these things. And so like, it's just a really interesting video when you see like the colorization, and I promise you, I will revolt if someone tells me that I have to wear my shorts that high. But in the end, like
So-
people are people, and this video is another example of like looking a long time ago. People are just people, but we're challenging them when like the little bits and stuff, and like that kind of
Little
idea
bits.
is just like, yeah. I mean, just in the end, it's the incremental bullshit that we're running into, because like if you just threw a couple of differences in those videos, that video easily could have been a summer video from multiple places around where I live currently right now. I mean, without any major change at all. I had a few people with a little bit different, melanin pigment. We're looking at basically the same video. It's not that different. You go to the Put-in Bay and Sandusky area. You go to the beaches that I was at. There wasn't a whole lot of minorities at those places. Like, it's not that different. And so like you see the past and the future, and that concept of where we are, and you learn from it, but it's also not that different. I don't know. I just found it interesting to see that it's like an early colorized version of
Before
video.
the times.
Yeah, I guess. I don't know.
The time that before they invented color. Ooh, I guess that means it's my turn now.
The devil's advocates.
All right. Yeah. So this is a podcast that I heard about a week or two ago, actually, and it is brand spanking new. It itself has only been out since about the 18th. And what it is this journalist, she's done a little bit of digging into Mother Teresa. I mean, obviously, a lot of us in the secular movement, any of us who are over 30 in the secular movement anyways, remember that Hitch wrote the missionary position. They actually have Hitch bits in there. But what's interesting is that it doesn't just focus on, like the big crimes or the big overarching problems that there were. They also, they get former sisters of the order to give interviews and discuss their experiences there, and some of them were positive, which we come to expect, because these types of organizations are very good at doing just enough good that they can garner favor in the right places. And then it talks a lot about a lot of the hardships that were faced by the Sisters of the Order, and a lot of the problems that were seen by those who weren't allowed to say anything. So I think it's been really interesting so far. I'm hoping they do continue going a little further and deeper into it, and that it's not just going to be like 5-10 episodes or whatever and then it's done, because I think there's so much more to get into than where we're at, especially given that it's iHeartRadio, which has a lot of friggin' commercials. So that was my only issue with it.
Popular podcast similar to this, Ron Burgundy podcast.
Yeah, there's a Ron Burgundy podcast. Actually, what was really funny is that even Robert Evans has appeared on here a few times, which is, I thought was pretty cool. His advertisement, or rather, has appeared on there talking about his book. So anyways, yeah, it is really interesting. It gives you kind of a little bit more perspective other than just kind of, like I said, the big overarching things that we're all kind of vaguely aware of. She took money from Charles Keating, the Ponzi scheme guy in the 1980s. She was very two-faced when it came to divorce, because she said, yes, Diane, she deserves divorce, she must be happy, and then divorce is a really evil thing, and the list goes on and on and on.
So wait, the saint said that the rich white girl gets a pass?
I know, right? So yeah, it's for those of you who are interested, I know for many, Mother Teresa is kind of put on this pedestal, and people will not touch her or hear any criticism of her. So if you really want to talk about her, you could just use her actual name, Agnes Bajashu, and leave it at that, and then nobody will know who the hell you're talking about. So give it a listen if that's your Jimmy Jams. And anyways, if any of you haven't listened to it and you want to, at me or get mad at me, you've got my Twitter. It's Buddy Lumberjack.
Yeah, I've already added it to my podcast regiment. All right. So as we wrap up, Frakkle, you get the stage. You got 30 seconds. Tell everybody where they can find you, how they can get a hold of you, and when you stream.
Okay. You can find me on Twitch TV/Frakkle on Wednesday nights at 5 p.m. till midnight Eastern. You can also find an archive of my highlights on youtube.com/Frakkle. I'm working on getting some of those sent over to the Rogue Media coop as well.
There you go.
So yeah, hope to see people there.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Wow, that's loud. And thank you all for joining us tonight. We will be back next week with another amazing episode of Cellar Door Skeptics. We will continue our interview series June 21st with David from the Rogue Media Coop, where the chickens all come to roost. Anyway, thank you so much. Oh, fuck off, Hannah. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We've had an amazing episode. We'll be back next week with another episode of Cellar Door Skeptics. Thank you all, and have a good night.